Nintendo's recent announcement that they were ending their game voucher program was interesting but not entirely surprising. While I haven't talked about this on YouTube previously, I did actually do a video on this topic before, and I don't usually plug the Patreon at the top of the video, but if you go onto my Patreon and go back to the 24th of November 2025, there is a video which I will make free to access for members that I decided not to release. However, to save you time, I will read the conclusion of that video to you here. I said, so what's the future of the game voucher program? I suspect 50% likely we'll see a revision of its terms by the end of 2026. If we don't, and the Switch successor has, as seems inevitable, more games at a $70 price point or regional equivalent, then $100 for two vouchers does become attractive. But it's difficult to believe that they'll let this significant offer remain on their online service once enough people have transitioned over to the new console, and while the service is continuing to expand dramatically in scope with Nintendo Music, more console services, and additional online games. Now, you may wonder why I never released this video. It wasn't because I disagree with the conclusion or anything like that, and I do from time to time keep videos Patreon exclusive for weeks or months if I don't anticipate the fundamentals changing anytime soon, so the content won't date. But actually, I held this one back because I didn't think I got the tone of the original video quite right. I have a lot of criticisms about the way this program operated, but while I don't mind getting hyped up about something cool now and then, I tried to remain objective and felt the video was not quite what I wanted it to be. So look, in my forecast, I gave Nintendo a generous period until the end of next year to change course, and they have obviously decided to make that change straight up. There is one obvious inference that we can all make, which is that a deal which worked for $60 titles is going to be much harsher on Nintendo's bottom line when an increasing number of games are $70. The reason I felt they may hold off on a change until later on is that anything that privileges Nintendo Switch Online customers over that tricky transition period between consoles might have been seen as a wise strategic move, and then they could retire the vouchers perhaps after the Switch 2 has had a year or more on the market. Clearly, though, they have decided to take things in a different direction. Now, it may be that there are just not financial reasons behind the change. We know that the relatively new studio created with DNA, Nintendo Systems, has been hard at work revamping the eShop, and it's possible that they have a different, more elegant way to approach these vouchers going forward. And frankly, I kind of hope they do drastically rethink them. I have mixed feelings about vouchers as a sales strategy outright. The fast food version of my criticism is that actually it's quite easy to end up paying over the odds for a Nintendo perk supposedly targeting their core fans. For one thing, consumer surveys suggest that 3 to 5% of all vouchers are never redeemed, so even initiating a voucher system I have mixed feelings about. But Nintendo has some especially draconian rules for its voucher programs, whereby you lose the voucher if you don't purchase a game within a year. To be clear, this is a game that you have already effectively paid for through the voucher, and this voucher would only be available in the first place to people who are already signed up to Nintendo Switch Online and purchasing from Nintendo's pre-chosen selection of titles. Sure, most people, if they're going to use vouchers, should be alert to the small print and make sure they utilize them effectively, so we are probably talking about a small number of people who would potentially lose their money without a game. But the fact is that anybody is vulnerable to this seems, to say the least, puzzling to me when the stakes are so low for Nintendo. Anybody who has forgotten a voucher for 1 year has to be less likely to make good on the purchase anyway, but the fact that they could discover one day after a year has passed that they've accidentally flushed the cost of a game down the toilet has to sting. Yes, it's designed to pressure people to make a purchase they might not want immediately, but 1 year is not that long a time period. Ireland has actually legislated for a minimum 5-year term for vouchers, but I suspect Nintendo have got round this in this case by classing Nintendo Switch Online as a customer loyalty scheme, which is exempt from Ireland's rules. However, there's little stopping them from at least allowing the vouchers to remain usable for a year, or until the program is sunsetted, whichever comes last. Or, given that they control the games on offer for the deal anyway, they could easily have kept it going for 2 years if they wished, and the fact that they didn't is probably instructive as to their future plans. But the other issue with this offer specifically was because many of the games on offer are frequently as good or better value not purchased with a voucher. I'll use the UK numbers still because they're to hand, but regional equivalents apply, of course. You can pay £84 for 2 games upfront in voucher form, effectively 2 games at £42 each. But frequently games appear that are under £40, meaning that unless one of these games is Tears of the Kingdom, you are effectively being charged extra for using a voucher if you purchase a title like WarioWare, Fitness Boxing, Emio, or what have you. It's one thing to offer deals which mildly exploit less financially literate customers, but since game vouchers are a perk for their most loyal subscribers, this seems like a particularly harsh approach. It's not like companies are obliged to tell you how to save money, but I think it's reasonable to expect that a voucher bought as a bonus should actually have some value without the customer having to be incredibly careful in their purchasing. The differences we're talking about are infinitesimally small for Nintendo, rounding errors on their balance sheet, and sure, it's only likely to affect a vanishingly small number of people, but yet they're risking customer dissatisfaction for, as far as I can see, nothing. So how did they end up here, and where do they go next? My hunch is that even if they agree with my appraisal of the program, it is not something they got to from first principles. I don't think they sat in a meeting and thought, let's do a voucher program that risks some of our core customers being upset. But of course, all these kinds of offers in a big multinational are going to require sign-offs at so many different levels, and Nintendo's instinctive reaction is not to offer deals. Deals really go against that principle of keeping the value of their product high, so they're never going to pull out the big guns in terms of offering deals, or not unless they're desperate. But they also know that the perception of deals can be motivational, and so there is pressure to use the architecture and the language of a deal. What's the solution then? Why, simple enough. Offer something that looks like a deal, but involves the minimum possible sacrifice for the company. So why not go with a simple percentage deduction instead of a voucher system? Well, first of all, adding a bit of complexity kind of stops the system from being used too often, which probably saves money, even though they can advertise it as an advantage of the NSO service. But also, I suspect that they don't want people thinking in terms of money when it comes to discussion of their games, but just of the entertainment that is being provided. It's cleaner and simpler to say one voucher, one game, than to get into percentages. So, what is next for Nintendo's approach? Well, I think we can now say with a 90% certainty that we are going to get $70 titles on Switch 2. The fact that they withdrew a voucher program suggests to me that it is likely that they will eventually introduce a new voucher program, since it would have been easier for the two deals to coexist if it was different from vouchers. Having said that, I think there's a good reason not to worry about vouchers at this point in Switch 2's life. Currently, the demand is going to be exceedingly high for the console, and under these circumstances, they probably don't need to sweat the costs too much. It's only a few years in, when they are worried about people continuing to buy their products, that they will worry too much about starting to offer deals, as long as everything goes to plan anyway. Now, that said, it's plausible that as part of the ecosystem for the Switch 2 system, they will want to announce the availability of some deals for subscribers, and it feels to me at least 50% likely that we will see at least one special offer for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers this year announced, if not the announcement of a way for subscribers to gain extra rewards from game purchases. This would be a particularly good way to ameliorate any increases in the base price for Nintendo Switch Online. Again, it's tricky to determine how wise it is or isn't to boost the price right now. On the one hand, it's good to do it while the demand for the system is high. On the other hand, for all those millions of consumers not on Switch 2, but who are on Nintendo Switch Online, it could end up booting them out of the ecosystem. Another option could be to say that Nintendo Switch Online is more expensive for Switch 2 owners only, but perhaps soften the blow by saying that Nintendo Switch Online subscribers can access better game deals. This does raise the question of whether they will tamper with Nintendo Switch Online in other ways. My hunch is that there's still a good deal of room for GameCube and DS titles to be revised and revamped and released as separate stock keeping units, so I'm skeptical that either of these consoles will drop wholesale in the same way that the SNES, N64 and so on have. But I could see them doing some lesser known consoles for users of both Switches, for example Virtual Boy, Game & Watch, or even 32X and Sega Mega CD. Even if they do have designs for DS games to be adapted in the future as discrete purchasing options, they may simply take the approach that they did with Super Mario RPG and hold the game from the Nintendo Switch Online service. And the DS has the advantage that its touch screen approach would work very well in combination with mouse mode, and especially well, as I speculated back along, if there were an additional screen accessory that could be bolted onto the top USB port. More on how that USB port could be used on the screen here, and thank you for watching, commenting, sharing and subscribing, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.